Welcome to the Steve and Cimino Says Boom Show, issue number 61.
Boom.
Boom.
Hey everyone, welcome to Pop XP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the Pop XP channel.
Welcome, everybody, to the Steve and Cimino Says Boom Show, issue 61, and we are live in the house. And before we get into it, we got the man, the tech, the immortus down below. Niall Scala, tell us what's going on.
Oh, gentlemen, you know what's going on, and everyone out there in YouTube land knows what's going on. Make sure to look below, click that subscribe button, and smash that bell when we go live with awesome episodes like this. And we're uploading some new episodes of the Steve and Cimino Says Boom Show. And gentlemen, I'm in for a treat. I'm excited to dive into the weeds, Steve, with our lovely guest tonight.
See, first off, Steve, you see how Niall has been so influenced by us. Look, into the weeds. Look at the bald head. All of a sudden, he's pumping the iron. He think all of a sudden he's getting too big for his britches. Look at that. I love it.
He is a big boy, so you got to be careful. If he puts some weight on, he's going to be bestriding the earth.
I'm going to be riding around Steve's back around the conventions. We'll be a bald-headed duo.
And Steve, soon enough, he's going to be sending us videos of him in all this spandex and lifting weights. It's going to get crazy. It's going to get crazy.
Well, you know, his wife's going to be happy if he's in that shape.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, his wife's always happy. All right. We got a big one today. And you know what? Before we get into it, let's get into the weeds of this. This guy, he's been in the scene for like ever. I mean, seriously, I think he's like the golden age agent. And I took a lot of stuff from him. But when I was back in the day, like in the early 2000s and stuff, I do remember seeing him, you know, when I was just a con goer and all that stuff. I always remember seeing him with a lot of those artists and stuff and the creators. And at that time, as you know, Steve and Niall, back in those days, they didn't get the crazy lines. I mean, they did get big lines, but not like today. But I remember always seeing this guy. And in 2016, that in Rhode Island, I really got to know him. And I'm going to say something that this guy did. I was just starting with Roy and stuff, and I really got to talk with him. And he was having this dinner with Steranko, I think Texera, Roy, Dan, Carla Conway. They were all going to that. And he said that I could come. Like, I mean, it was I was still new to the scene and nervous, but I got to admit, I was really nervous because, like, I've never been in a room with, like, it was at this restaurant with all these, all those creators. And I remember Steranko there too. He was just talking it up. And me and my friend John had to leave. There was something that came up and we had to leave. And I remember the next day, Steranko came up to my friend John and he said to him, "Where'd you guys go?" Like, he goes, "Where'd you guys go? You were so quiet there." We were both nervous, but it was so interesting that Steranko, like, remembered that. But I remember Spurlock there kind of leading the way of everything. And I just thought, like, man, I'd love to be like that guy one day with all these people. And then it was an honor to get to really know this guy. And now I know he doesn't do much of the agent stuff, but he's been in the scene and he's a huge historian writing all these books. And a la Roy Thomas, he keeps a lot of these legends alive. What can you talk about this guy coming up, Steve? Can you say?
Well, it's interesting. It's one of the most important meetings of my entire comic book life involved Mr. Spurlock. Back in 2004, when he was an agent for John Buscema and Carmine Infantino.
Yeah.
And I went to go and get something signed, and that was the first time that I was aware of him. And we will get into it, of course, once the show gets going. But it's, even to this day, it's the most important con event that I ever had. That's all I'll say right now, but because it is absolutely astounding, and it'll never be matched. Yeah,
I mean, this guy has been there, and he's cultivated away. And I have to admit, like I said, that I owe a lot of my career. Like, I patterned myself against this guy because I remember seeing him with all this stuff, and we want everybody else. I know he's a big name and a lot of people know him and stuff, but it's going to be great to get into what we do on this podcast, to get into the mind of this guy and see what he's got coming up. So, Mr. Neal Scala, without further ado, let's bring out Mr. J. David Spurlock.
And the crowd goes wild.
And look, I think Dave is trying to be like you guys too with the hair. He's got with the head. I think
I've been practicing, but they got a little more glare on theirs. No, I want to thank you guys for all the kind words. You were a lot easier on me than you were on Neal.
Hey, well, that PayPal payment really paid off, so we wanted to do right by you.
All right. Thank you for being here, David. Obviously, you're a wealth of knowledge from the back end. This is a beautiful thing. Like, obviously, we talk to creators and they see stuff, but like where you have so much more of a history. Like where I am now, like I'm behind the scenes with all these guys, and I go to all these parties and all this stuff. But you literally were there first, and you were there with those classics that were just, I mean, just like Steve said, John Buscema, Julie Schwartz. I mean, please, Dave, tell us your origins. How did David Spurlock been birthed into this industry? And you've been here forever, man. It's just a pleasure, like, to hear all this.
Well, it's not quite forever, but I was raised in Texas, and I wanted to draw comics, create comics. And in those days, when I got out of school in the 70s, you still had to be in commuting distance in New York to work in the comics industry. Pre-faxes, pre-FedEx. You could be in Connecticut. You could drive in from Connecticut or Jersey, but that's about it, And so I went into advertising and graphic design, but the love of comics never left me. And I did publish. The first thing I published was about 1980. It's called Badge, and it's got Gorilla playing a Les Paul on the cover of it. And those are pretty rare. And then, but I lost a bunch of money on that. So the next time I came around and started getting into publishing was about 10 years later, and I researched it for a year and got a distribution contract before I ever went to press. And before that was a comics anthology called Tales from the Edge. And I started thinking, how can I get people I admire? I was doing a thing called Space Cowboy, character I created. And it was kind of influenced by like Williamson, Wally Wood, Frank Frazetta, kind of EC stuff, and also the old Buster Crabbe movie serials from the 40s, Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon movie serials. Mainly the Buster Crabbe influence came in because Al Williamson was such a Buster Crabbe fan. And the whole thing was kind of an homage to Williamson. I really loved Al. And when I started doing books instead of comics, the first sketchbook I published was the Al Williamson sketchbook. And that created, and then I created the line of sketchbooks. And there were no sketchbooks. There were no comic artist sketchbooks. I really opened things up with the sketchbook line. And we did Williamson, Neal Adams, Wally Wood, John Romita, John Buscema. I've done multiple volumes on Frazetta. And then from there, at a certain point, when I met Infantino, when I moved to New York in the mid-'90s, really, that made a huge difference. You know, just being in New York, I had been teaching art at the University of Texas, and then when I moved to New York, I knew I wanted to teach at the Kubert School. I went over to the Kubert School, and they were. I was very flattered that they were blown away with my portfolio and my resume, and they said you could teach any number of classes here. So they hired me immediately at the Kubert School. And then very shortly after that, I met Joe Orlando, who had been vice president of DC, and at this point he was the highest-ranking person in Mad Magazine. And he said, "You're too good for Kubert. We want you at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, and we pay real money." So actually, I did go over there to School of Visual Arts, and you know, within a few years, I launched 2 scholarship funds there: the Wally Wood Scholarship Fund and the Steranko Spirit of America Scholarship Fund. So anyway, that's a little bit about. But things really did open up for me very quickly once I moved to New York in the mid-90s, because then I could work with the guys. It was easier to work with the guys that had inspired me to get into the business in the first place.
Wow. So is that how you got into being like an agent or get behind the scene?
Well, when I was in Texas, I was the head of the Society of Illustrators, the Dallas branch of the Society of Illustrators. And so between teaching part-time, working as an illustrator, and being the head of the Society of Illustrators, my orientation was always doing what's best for the artist. So when I got into publishing, it wasn't like most people who were looking to make a buck. I was looking to do it out of camaraderie and solidarity in artists working together for the good of the artist. And so everything I was doing was 50-50 split, and nobody was offering 50-50 net split in those days. You know, a publishing contract was 10% if you were lucky, and comic books were just flat page rates. So that got people's attention. It's like, oh, this guy's, you know, this guy's trained up, you know. And and also I kind of, in a way, I started at the top because I started working with Williamson and Steranko very early, and everyone else in the industry thought the world of them. So it's like that became my calling card. Oh, well, he works with Al Williamson and Jim Steranko. He's got to be good, you know. And then before long, I got a little reputation for working with people who were difficult to work with. I think I remember Paul Levitz saying to someone repeating to me that Paul Levitz has said to them, well, the guy's got to have something good going on with him if he can get along with Steranko, Infantino, and Adams, because those guys were
big personalities,
tough to work with. So it kind of blossomed, but the gem of it was the kind of an equal partnership, solidarity of looking for the good. So when they saw that, they're like, hey, look, you know, I got this contract someone's offering me. Could you look this over for me? Yeah, I could do that. Or, you know, hey, you know, one time Marvel called Steranko, and he said, go fuck yourself. And then he backtracked a second. He says, well, I'll tell you what, you know, if David's willing to talk to you, he says, you wasted my time before. I'm not about to put any of my time into this project without a contract on the table. But if David's willing to talk to you, he can speak for me. And so I started going up and having meetings with Calabrese and Cheryl Rhodes, you know, at Marvel on Steranko's behalf. So it kind of grew. It's like the trust built. They knew that I was coming from an artist background, that I had been involved with the Society of Illustrators, and so they knew that what I was really interested was their welfare. So that kind of, it blossomed into the agent situation.
Wow. Before I give it to Steve, now why don't you throw just to see, we could throw up a few pictures now just to see some of the companies Mr. Spurlock has been around through the ages. Why don't you talk about each photo, Dave?
That's Frank Frazetta, and that was Father's Day, 1996. I spent the whole day with Frank, and Ellie cooked spaghetti as usual. And it was funny because Frank was Sicilian heritage. Ellie was Irish heritage. Her maiden name was Kelly. She referred to all pasta as spaghetti, and it did. So I figured that out pretty quick, that she referred to all pasta as spaghetti. So I'd say, well, what kind of pasta are we having today? Oh, today we're having what type of spaghetti are we having today? Well, today we're going to have angel hair spaghetti. She just used the word spaghetti instead of pasta for whatever type of pasta she was going to make today. It was very interesting with them because in some ways, Frank ruled the roost until it came to the business side. And when it came to the business side, Ellie ran the business. So it's like every now and then I'd say something to Frank, you have to talk to Ellie about that. Or I'd say something to Ellie about art. Well, you have to talk to Frank about that. But no matter what was going on, if she was in the museum, I gotta go make the spaghetti. It's like all of a sudden it's like a hang on the pond. It's like she's running the business. It's like 4 o'clock. It's time to go put the spaghetti on.
Yeah. Throw up another one now.
Was actually taking an interview specifically about Wally Wood.
Hey, Dave, your connection is very bad coming in.
Yeah.
We're losing you.
Hello?
Hey, Dave, do me a favor. Log out and log back in and close any other browsers you have open.
Hold on a second. Let me try.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it any better?
It's a lot better.
It's a lot better.
Okay, excellent. Okay, hopefully that'll do it.
All right.
It was like you were underwater fighting Prince Namor. Now you're up. You're up. All right, put up back.
You got you back. Let's get this image up now.
There we go. Look at this. Wow.
I love this photo.
It's like a mafia.
You see, yes, that's the comic book mafia right there. You see what's hanging around my neck? That is a share of stock to Stanley Media. That night, there were 2 big events going on that same night. This was in San Diego, maybe 1999, possibly. And Stan's company, Stanley Media, was going public that night. And they had a party at Planet Hollywood. But there was another event honoring Jerry Robinson.
Wow.
Batman affiliate Jerry Robinson elsewhere. So Steranko and I were at the Stanley Media event, but Stan had agreed to come to the Jerry Robinson event, which Jim and I were also going to say a few words about Jerry. So we left. Stan left with us before his event was over. And we all limoed together over to the Robinson event. And Carmine, this was Carmine's first San Diego convention appearance in a quarter century. I brought Carmine to San Diego. I was involved with bringing Buscema to San Diego. Buscema had never done San Diego before. He had done New York a few times in the 70s at Marvel's request, but he had never done San Diego. But he didn't generally Buscema did not like doing American conventions, but he loved doing European conventions. And practically every summer, he'd go to Italy for one convention or another. And then Julie Schwartz, before he got into comics, he was the world's first science fiction literary agent.
Yeah.
and that included for Ray Bradbury was one of his. He was the first agent for Ray Bradbury, and I was Julie's last agent. So I liked that connection. Julie was Bradbury's first agent, and I was Julie's last agent. I've got a really funny story about Julie if you want to hear one.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. But Dave, I want to know how you got into the middle of that picture. There's a lot of ego there. How'd you get in the middle?
I'm the man, brother. That the photo speaks for the document speaks for itself. And I wouldn't be if I wasn't doing stuff for these guys. I would be in the middle of that photo.
I'm surprised.
The photo speaks better than I can speak.
He's got the certificate of authenticity around his neck of everyone he was with.
And that's before CGC or CGCS. I got the stamp of approval.
Get the next one now.
Yeah.
All right, so this isn't just a photo of me and Stan. This is Stan posting the photo of me and Stan on the official Stan Lee Facebook page, citing me as an award-winning pop culture historian. The photo was taken that we had just come off stage at Atlanta Dragon Con, and we had 4,600 people there in the auditorium. But it was also broadcast. They have what they call Dragon Con TV during the convention, which is broadcast there in Atlanta. So I have no idea how many people were watching on Dragon Con TV, but we had 4,600 people in the live audience there in the auditorium. And this is right at we've just come through those doors coming off stage. This is coming into the backstage area when that photo was taken.
Wow. That was 2010, that picture, correct?
That sounds right.
Yeah, okay. That was just before he was starting to get with the other guys, huh? Or was he?
Well, I wasn't his agent, but he liked doing panels with me. In fact, we won about a year before that one. We did a show in Pasadena. And after that, he said, that's the best interview I think I've ever had. Now, Stan, he made everybody feel good. He made a point of me. So, he could have been blowing smoke, but, I liked it anyway. So, but I would say that if he were being genuine, and I think there was some kernel of genuineness in the compliment, it was because it was a small show. And so his road manager, who was sitting on the front row, regularly would be like, take questions from the audience, stuff like that. But because it was a small show, he didn't care. It's like, well, we're not getting any publicity value here. So he was on his probably a Blueberry in those days or whatever, and so he wasn't even really paying attention. So I got to ask Stan anything I wanted to ask him, and we got to really talk comics. I mean, we did talk. By that time the movies were already big, and I had in one of our panels we did together. I tell you though, there was competition from Jimmy Palmiotti. For a while, Stan was saying that I was his favorite guy to do panels with, and then all of a sudden Palmiotti popped up, and there was competition. Hey, it's hard to go against Jimmy, you can't hardly beat Jimmy. But there was one time the question came from the audience asking Stan, and you got to realize Stan got this question all the time, was which one of the movies is your favorite? Okay. I want to talk about what was going on in the 60s in comic books, and they all want to talk about the movie that came out last month.
Right. It's
natural. It's a bigger audience. So I said, Stan, can I take a shot at this? He says, go ahead, kid. I said, when you create a character, it's kind of like having a child. You love all of your children. And so it's just not right to say which one of your children do you love the most. You love them all. But you always enjoy seeing them do well. And the X-Men movie that just came out is doing record box office. So right now, X-Men is doing real well. And I'm sure Stan's very proud of that. And Stan says, that's great. Can I use that? It's true, Stan. You can use it.
Go ahead now. Put another.
Let's put this one up for our comrade in spirit.
Oh, look at that.
Really?
There we go.
Yeah. I was telling Niall before we came on that Billy and I are neighbors, regular neighbors at the San Diego Comic-Con. This is at San Diego. And so we always see each other in San Diego, and we regularly see each other in New York too. But this particular photo, we were having fun because we were both wearing Wally Wood shirts.
Oh, it just happened to be that way?
No, I had premiered the Wally Wood shirts at my booth, and he made a point to pick one up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, look at Billy. Always happy. Always good. And always here in spirit right now. Always
here in spirit. But we'll get you on a Thursday Night Live with Tucci, and you guys can catch up.
Got another one now?
Yeah, let's see. This one looks good. I like this one right here.
Oh.
I love that photo. John Romita, there's no nicer guy. About the nicest guys in the business, Romita and Dick Ayers. I used to go, after I left New York, I moved to Miami, and I would come back up and visit, and the Ayers loved me so much. They said, look, we want you to come over and stay at our house. I'd stay over there for a while. And but the Romitas, I've got other photos at John and Virginia's home, and they're just like family, just the best people you could ever hope to meet.
Oh, yeah.
We used to do conventions together. I used to do the conventions with John, and I got a funny story I could tell when I first started working with John, but I'm not going to tell that one. I got friends that come to me. There's a couple guys in particular. Ed Cato?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He does they own the toy, right?
Captain Action.
Captain Action. Yeah.
Ed Cato, he's a wonderful guy, and so they would come to the booth, and he and his buddy would come to the booth in San Diego, and I'd tell them some stories, and I'd say, but they said, oh, you ought to put that one in a book, and I said, no, that one I can't put in the book, and this went on for like a couple of years. One year they came to me and they said, we got an idea for a fabulous book. I said, what's that? And he says, the behind the scenes stories of the comics industry by J. David Spurlock. But you can't tell anyone or you'll be swimming with the fishies.
Well, look at this one.
I call this one The Guys. And this was a very strange period when New York Comic Con came in. That's a big company. Reed is a big company. They've owned Adweek, which is like the magazine Bible for the advertising industry, Library Journal. Those guys, they're deeply rooted in both the publishing industry and also conventions. They run the biggest publishing convention in America, which is called Book Expo America. And they realized that these Comic Cons kept getting bigger and bigger, and there was nobody doing a really big show in New York. The biggest show in New York was the Big Apple, which wasn't that big. And so New York, I knew Reed, and I had worked with them in different ways, before they got interested in Comic Cons. And so I told everyone I was connected with, including Neal, these guys, they got deep pockets and they're connected to everybody, and this thing's going to happen. And he wasn't familiar with them. And but Wizard decided that they wanted to try to go head to head with New York Comic Con.
Oh yeah, they were going that. They were starting. Yeah,
Comic Con was blowing up immediately. The first year they were already at the Javits. They premiered at the biggest convention center in Manhattan in New York, but they had a small hall, and the fire marshal cut them off. And if a dealer went outside to smoke a cigarette, he couldn't get back in.
I remember that.
A certain number of people came out. People were ticked off. There were people that had driven down from like Maine, driven in from like 2-3 states away, and they had their tickets, but they couldn't get in because the place was packed. But Wizard wanted to compete with them. So they decided, what's the longest running show in New York? And it was Mike Carbonero's Big Apple show. So they made a deal with Mike to buy the Big Apple so they could claim that they were the longest running show in New York. And they wanted to literally go head to head the same weekend as New York Comic Con. I'm like, oh, man, these guys, this is rough. It was rough. It was a bloodbath. I'm not going to tell you the rest of that story, but I will say that photo was at one of the shows that Wizard did when they were involved with Big Apple. And I had a great group. We were all set up together. We were all working together at the time. That was Basil Gogos, who's the world's most famous monster movie portrait artist, did all the covers for famous monsters of Filmland. Very well-respected illustrator. Even Neal Adams. Neal Adams was hard to impress, but Neal Adams was impressed by Basil Gogos. I mean, these guys were like, well, he's a real artist. He's not a funny book guy. He's a real artist. And Steranko, Basil Gogos, myself, Neal, and Joe Kubert. And there was nobody that Neal respected more. Actually, all three of those guys, Neal had the highest respect. He grew up on Kubert and Infantino, and he just loved Joe Kubert.
And Joe was such a wonderful man, Joe Kubert. Like, oh my God, he's like a Romita. They were so humble, so nice, you know.
Sorry, his number one character was Sergeant Rock, but Joe was the man of rock. He was the toughest guy at DC. And I could tell you some other stories about. Say, for instance, Julie Schwartz married this beautiful strawberry blonde. Well, she had dated Joe a couple of times before she hooked up with Julie. And Julie was so proud that this gorgeous strawberry blonde that had dated the man of rock, the hunk of DC Comics. This guy was a war hero. Okay? He wasn't just drawing comic books about the war. He'd been in the war. Okay? And this dweeb Jewish literary agent with glasses and a big schnauz won her heart. It meant the world to him.
Go ahead, Steve. Oh, wait, we got to throw that in there.
We got to throw this one. We got to throw this one.
Look at that one.
That was the subliminal. Well, yeah, I want to tell you, Roy was one of the first guys I ever met in the business. I met Roy next year.
Great
next
picture.
year will be our 50th anniversary. I first met Roy in '74. I showed him some of my art, and he liked it. And somewhere, I probably still have those couple of pages I showed him in 1974.
Yeah, that's a great picture too. He looks great. What year was that?
That one wasn't that long ago. I'm trying to remember where we took that one at. It may have been, you may have been involved with that. I know I spent some good time with him at the SuperCon in South Florida. You remember that?
Yeah. Is that Broder's show? Broder?
Yeah. Steranko and Adams. I had Steranko, Adams, and Gogos were there, and then Roy was just like 1 aisle away. He was not far from where Neal was at.
Yeah. Okay.
Neal
Go ahead.
Neal and I got into a funny conversation at that show about Gil Kane.
Well, I want
Neal tried to say Gil Kane never did a bad drawing in his life. I said, really? Double jointed fingers? You know, I started posing in Gil Kane poses, looking up my nostril. I'm like, hey, I actually do a Gil Kane imitation. What are you showing me? The Buscema, nice autograph. Did you get that signed in San Diego?
I did. And if you look there, it says to Steve, the biggest fan of all, John Buscema.
That's fabulous.
And I remember I can't find them right now, but I had a little tiny plastic camera, and I was in line. I also had, at that time, that was in a big tube, and I had a T-shirt, and you were sitting back there with Carmine Infantino, and I said, "Excuse me," and I was very nervous. I mean, I couldn't get the damn thing out of the poster tube, and John looked at me and was like, "Calm down, it's okay." But I was just like, I had waited 20 years to see John Buscema.
Oh yeah.
And I don't care what anyone says. I don't care if you own 5,000 pages of John Buscema art. There isn't a bigger fan in the world than me. I couldn't even speak. I was like, and I called you over and I said, "Please, can you take pictures?" I gave you this little camera. And you went around and I think you took like 20 pictures. You were taking all these different pictures. And finally you went, "I think I've done enough." And you gave me the camera back. And I was like, "Okay, thank you." And, I had all the pictures done. And of course, I think that was 2004. So shortly after that, of course, John passed. So that moment.
I think it was 2001.
Was it 2001? Okay, 2001. But after John passed, I remember I took out all these pictures, and I was so thankful that I had this opportunity to, get my favorite piece of art signed. And the fact that I just looked behind there and I saw Carmine Infantino, I was like, "Oh my God." And I had also gone and seen Basil Gogos as well, because he was there with his wife, right?
Yeah.
And I was talking, and she was always interrupting. I don't know. I was trying to tell him how good he was, and she was like, "I'll tell you how good he was." I'm like, well, I was like, "Did you draw?" I don't know.
Actually, she's a very successful modern artist. It has her works in galleries around the world.
Same thing happened with Gene Colan. Gene was there with his wife. I tried to speak to Gene, and she wouldn't let me speak. But when it came to, I remember I was trying to get that damn tube open. And of course, you were looking back like this going, "What in the hell is going on here?" And behind me, people were huffing, going, and so I finally got the damn thing out. And I remember I'm a full grown man and I'm acting like a child. And, so that there is one of the things that there's a fire here. I'm going to get that out or I'm going to die. All of those comics you see in those boxes, I can replace like this. Yeah. That signature is absolutely priceless.
Yeah.
Because with that signature, it encompasses what I was able to ask him, and as you'll know far better than me that John.
I'm really happy you got those photos. I'm really happy. I just wish I could have gotten in one of them. I'll tell you another guy that really meant the world to him that he got to meet John there that weekend was Dan Brereton. He was thrilled, and he came to me afterwards and he says, "I can't thank you enough. This guy means the world to me." So it was so rare, and the thing was that John was actually already sick at that point, and he had been misdiagnosed. If he had been properly diagnosed, he never would have come to that show, but he would have died anyway. Him not coming to that show would not have any way helped his treatment. That treatment was useless. Even when they figured out the proper diagnosis, there was no way to save him. But I think it was really great that he made it because his fans saw him so little. Unless you were in Italy, you didn't get to see John. There was a show in White Plains, New York. We did with a long time. It's a one-off show because the promoter lost like $65,000 doing that show. He didn't want anything else in there but pure comics. That was the first show Carmine did in 25 years, and then we did Heroes, and then we did San Diego. So that was our little first year tour, getting Carmine back on the road. but Carmine was there, Murphy Anderson was there, Wrightson was there, Barry Smith was there, Buscema was there. It was a fan. Boris Vallejo. That was the first time I met Boris Vallejo, and that was a great show. But it lost money. There were as many guests there as there were attendees. But I want to show you something. But I'm going to have to run off camera for a second to grab it. All right. So you guys say nice things while I'm gone, and and this will be. I'll catch up on you if you say something wrong, because this is going to be on YouTube. I'll be right back.
You know, the funny thing is that when I was getting that thing signed, I kept telling John how great he was.
Oh, yeah.
I was showing him the picture, and I kept pointing to the feet. And I said, take a look at the toes. I said, notice how the toes are straining. And he was like, yeah. I said, no, really look. Because he said that he drew it in he just drew it. It's like, and again, he was very self-effacing. He's like, I just drew it. And there I was just going completely crazy.
Steve, I love the way he drew the Hulk in that issue. He drew him so thick, He would always
yes, magnificent.
Magnificent.
This was at the booth in San Diego.
Wow.
That's the original. Unfortunately, I didn't get John to sign it. I should have. I don't know why. We didn't know he was going to die. We didn't know he was that sick.
Yes.
But anyway, I wanted to show you that.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Yeah, he loved to draw Conan.
I did the color on that.
Yeah, in fact, I think that in some of my photographs, I can see that.
And I was,
by the way, you are in one of my pictures.
Oh, good.
Yes, you're sitting there with Carmine Infantino. You're right there.
Yeah, I'd love to have a copy of that at full resolution. His signature, John didn't sign that much of his published work, so his signature was not that famous, but I wanted to boost the fame of his signature, so I incorporated his signature into our promotional campaign for that, for the sketchbook, for the Buscema sketchbook.
John Buscema, oh my God.
Yes.
Oh God, what? Literally a top fiver. He's even more. I mean, it could be argued he's the best. I mean, it's all in there. Well,
again, for me, he's the best of all time. I know everyone has their own tastes, but to go to San Diego and see these specific, legends. Of course, my Frazetta story is very weird because, and I'm sure, David, you may remember this, but he walked around San Diego with a video camera thing that he was doing. And so he's doing this and filming, and I'm walking this way, and all of a sudden I bump. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I turn around, and then he's like, oh, and I went, no, it's okay. And then I stopped for a second and went, oh, it's Frank Frazetta. He
was, not only was he not advertised, he was wearing a fake name badge. It was they didn't want him to be crowded. They wanted him to enjoy himself. And then the word got to the convention that he was there. They didn't know he was there. The word got to him that he was there, and they're like, he's never been here before. He doesn't do conventions. We better come up with an Eisner Award for him real quick. And they did. He wasn't going to pick it up.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those moments, and I saw an art dealer walk by, and then almost broke his neck as he turned around and went like this. Ah! Around him, this exclusion zone began to, it was like a magnetic aura of power that was going around. And I was like, I got touched by Frank Frazetta. I was like, wow, it's unbelievable, But yeah, it was very weird. He seemed like he was very happy. He was just going around this little camera. Again, one of my memories of that moment. So yeah, very interesting. That's my only Frank story.
Hey Dave, I want to tell you, when I first saw you, you were with John Romita, and I
where was that at? Do you
I think it was Wizard World Philly.
We used to do Philly. I got a good story about Philly with Romita.
Yeah, but I remember you in the back there. But seeing John Romita for me, and John Romita Jr. was there too. And when I saw John Romita, I was and once again, I think it was around 2007, and there really wasn't many people there, like, and I'm just like, oh my God, like Steve, oh my God, like I was like, that's John Romita, like I could care less about celebrities, even to this day. I still get crazy with the comic creators. Like I still, even today, going to all these things with Roy and all that stuff, I still get the little kid in me. It gets crazy. But I remember your head behind there, and I just remembered this distinctively. And you and John were talking and all that stuff. And honestly, I'm gonna say, I was just like, I was so envious of you, even if I didn't know you, because I was like, you were just around these guys talking like it's no big deal. And I was just like, God, like I was just like joking. Oh my God, it was just awesome. But go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Well, one funny thing about John, he would always say, and he meant it sincerely, that he didn't care about the money. Okay, I was always working to make sure that all the guys knew that they got paid. Everything's taken care of. Everything's straight, and John was always like, David, I'm not worried about it. It's you. You don't have to worry about going over the numbers with me. And but Virginia did. So I always gave the money to Virginia. And so you keep the wives happy, and then the creator's always happy. So that's one thing I learned. You always keep the wives happy. Yep. But the story I like to tell about Philly is John's grandson, JR's son, Vinny. Okay. I believe that was one of Vinny's first conventions. I'm not sure how old he was, maybe 11, something like that. And JR was walking around, but Vinny stayed at the booth with me and John. John used to say, I'm John Romita. He's junior. I'm not senior. I'm John Romita. My son's John Romita Jr. But after time, JR started getting so big, and that meant a lot to John. So after a while, he said, okay, we start calling him JR instead of Junior. But so Vinny's there, and it seemed like a new experience for him. I mean, I don't remember someone saying to me, this is Vinny's first convention or something like that. But it seemed like a new experience with Vinny. There, we had a huge line, and it was way down the aisle. And John would do sketches, but you had to buy the book, and he'd do a head sketch on the inside. Oh. If only if you get the book, then you have an option to get a head sketch for additional charge. And Vinny was like amazed, it's just his grandpop to him. And all of a sudden, all these people love my grandfather. Vinny's looking around. People are lined up. It's packed, like start to shoulder, waiting to see they revere his grandfather. Yeah. And they all want to sketch. And Vinny, as a joke, says to this big crowd, who wants a sketch from me? And the guy waves back, says, how much? Vinny looks at me, says, how much? I said, tell him $25. $25. He says, I'll take one. Vinny's eyes got real big. He started drawing, and someone else was like, hey, I want one of those. Before you know it, his pockets were full of cash. By the time his father came back, he was on top of the world. And JR was like, I could see it in his eyes. He was worried it was going to go to Vinny's head. It was like, he says, well, we put some of that into the college fund. And Vinny's like, college fund? I want toys. So they figured out a balancing act. So everybody was happy, a little bit into the college fund, a little bit of toys. Don't let the cash go to the kid's head too quick. So I don't know what Vinny's doing today, but I was very proud that I helped facilitate Vinny's first original art cell, and that was Wizard Philly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dave, we're definitely going to have you back, and we're going to just do the con talk and all that stuff. So why don't we go into what you're doing now? Like, I mean, obviously you keep a lot of the Frazetta. Why don't you start showing us some of your books and all that stuff, and tell us about some of them. And you can obviously you're a big advocate for Wally Wood, Frank Frazetta. Why don't you show us what's coming out and what you've done?
Yeah, we've got a video clip to play for everyone too.
Oh yeah, let's play the video clip first.
I'll show you. Well, this will warm up for that. Since you didn't mention this artist, I'll start with this one, and it will warm up for the video clip. The video clip's only 3 minutes, so it shouldn't overwhelm anyone. I think it's fun. This is Margaret Brundage. Margaret Brundage. This work is from the 1930s.
Yes.
She was notorious for doing sexy pulp covers for Weird Tales magazine in the 1930s. She did all the original Conan stories appeared in Weird Tales, and when they got the cover, it was by Margaret Brundage. And some of the artists found out they could see that the editor, wanted these Brundage covers were very popular. One of the artists that were doing covers for Weird Tales prior to Brundage was J. Allen St. John, who was a big influence on Roy Crinkle and Frazetta and other people. Well, St. John, in some ways, was superior to Brundage, and he was Edgar Rice Burroughs' favorite illustrator. He was the first major famous, and he was Burroughs' personal favorite. And when the Depression hit, Burroughs tried to keep the money in the family. His son started doing art, and his nephew was doing art, but he told them do it like St. John. And Burroughs had some of the most famous illustrators, N.C. Wyeth, Schoonover, top illustrators. He preferred St. John because St. John got the fantasy and science fiction element better than those other guys. But Brundage came in and she basically took over as the cover artist. Her covers sold best, and they were sexy, and the editor liked that. And so some of the writers started making sure that every story had at least one sexy scene in there, because if their story made the cover, they got a bonus. And Howard did that. Now I'll tell you who didn't do it was H.P. Lovecraft. And this book won awards. This is one of my proudest achievements. And we got a quote on the back cover from the New York Times, a quote from L. Sprague de Camp, quote from H.P. Lovecraft, a quote from Playboy magazine, a quote from Walt Disney, who she went to high school with, a quote from Howard, a quote from Forrest J. Ackerman. You will not find any other book with a series of quotes like that on the back cover. So, but she did, because she did a lot, Weird Tales was the original venue for Robert E. Howard stories, the first sword and sorcery stories, including Conan. That's a nice lead into our little 3-minute video.
All right, so let's play this here.
All right, let's check it out.
Sorcery! Swords and sorcery! Sword-wielding warriors battling sorcerers and horrors most vile. But all sorcerers are not vile. Where would we be, you or I, if not for Gandalf? And he's here with us, yes. You can see him in town, leading walking tours of Howard's haunts. He may answer to Rusty, but we know who he really is. There are other types of sorcerers. All sorcerers don't take the wand, or the staff, or the athame, or the chalice. Some, like Lovecraft and Howard, pick up the plume, or even a type machine. Others still, with names like Frazetta, and Crinkle, Buscema, Windsor Smith, Wood, Imch, Freeze, Bach, Brundage, and St. John, the artist brush. These grand sorcerers' art are calling us now from beyond. One thing that separates me from my dear fellow scribes is that I knew and worked with many of these people, many of these sorcerers of old that I have mentioned.
I am the sorcerer's apprentice. Alas, these sorcerers old have moved beyond this mortal veil, abandoning me here to tell their tales.
I don't have a round of wine or mead to remember them with now, but I invite you, I implore you to join me in toasting them now with a round of applause.
Great energy in that video. I love that.
I saw that you had Alex Grand on there. Alex is a great guy. Great guy.
He helped me with the video editing, and I wrote that piece. I had been invited to speak there at the Robert E. Howard annual event, and so the first day I'm at my booth and I'm drafting these lines in my head. And I never wrote it down on paper. I'm just like kind of going through it, working on it in my head. And I had a couple of friends that stopped by every now and then. I said, yeah, I'm thinking about giving a little colorful opening to the panel tomorrow. And I'm thinking about getting kind of dramatic with it. Oh, yeah, you should do that. You should do that. So my reference to Rusty being that's the president of the Howard Foundation. So everyone there, the regulars, they know who I was.
Is that Rusty Burke? Rusty Burke?
Yeah. And he leads tours. I said, walking tours of Howard's haunts. He leads tours around the town, all the places that Howard would go to. So that meant a lot to me to actually write the piece on the property where Robert E. Howard wrote his most important sword and sorcery stories and deliver it there the next day.
Yeah, that was that. Yeah, going there too was wonderful. And when we had Roy, they wanted Roy on, like in his room at the typewriter and all that stuff. I got chills through that whole thing. You know, it's just like on his typewriter, like Roy, and then just you could, you know, they had him wear the fedora and all that stuff, but it was just like, holy moly.
There's kind of magic there. You know, one thing they do on the last thing they do there, they don't do it on Sunday. They do it, it's a Friday and Saturday event. It's a little tiny West Texas town, and they don't do it on Sunday because everybody in town goes to church on Sunday. So the last event is as the sun is setting on Saturday, they read Howard's poetry on his porch. You got the sun setting here, brilliant, colorful sky, and they read it in like 5 different languages. They got 5 people standing there on the porch, and they'll take they'll take a poem, and one guy will read it in English, another guy in Spanish, another guy in Italian, another guy in what Portuguese or whatever. I just find that magic.
Oh yeah. Before we get into your other books, I got to tell you all this. A quick story. What happened there with me and Roy would go at the Robert E. The one that you were at, but I don't know if you were at this event. Remember, Roy had the Q&A in that hall. So me and Roy are talking we're talking. It's in the middle of nowhere, Niall. Right? I mean, you can only go like 35 miles. I think I was going like 35 miles per hour on this road. I think I was going 45. I didn't even know. And me and Roy are just yapping. I pull into the driveway, and there's like over 100 people waiting for Roy. We notice there's a cop right behind us. Me and Roy get out of the car. and he says, "You to Roy, you can get out of there." He goes, "You." He goes, "I've been following you for a half mile." He goes, "Why didn't you stop?" They didn't put on the they didn't put on the sirens or anything. So in front of like 100 people all waiting for Roy, the guy's going, "You from Massachusetts?" And I was like, "Yeah." I go, "Listen, I didn't see you." I go, "We're here for them. This is Roy Thomas." I go, "We're here at the," and then he saw all this people and he let us go. So it was so embarrassing. I almost got arrested. So everybody files inside, and I had to host the event. I was like, and Rusty was there, and I go, Rusty goes, "Hey, he goes, you got out of prison, John?" And it was so bad. But it reminded me of that time, though. You know, just a funny time.
It's kind of like going back in time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the 1940s there.
And I'm a Spanish guy. You know what they're going to do to me? They're going to beat me down.
I tell you what, if it weren't Robert E. Howard days, they know that once a year the town is taken over by strange people that are wizards and warriors and wizards. And it's like, but they give them a little extra room.
Yes.
It's the only tourism they get there. And it's good. It's good for the town to have those events there. So there's a little, but they keep their eye on you.
Yeah, they were.
If you had done it, if it hadn't been Robert E. Howard days, it may have been worse.
Yeah. Go ahead. Show us another book. Go ahead, Dave.
This is my latest Wood book. This is a collection of Wood's war comics, and it's got all kinds of cool stuff, including DC. DC gave us permission to include the war comics that Wood had done for DC. We don't run any full-length EC, but we have articles on the EC work. Tommy Burns is a good friend of mine. He's one of the top EC experts. He wrote a really good original article for that. So that's the latest Wood book. Here's we may mention. Are you guys there?
Yeah.
We're right here.
Right. We got you full screen so you can show your stuff here.
All right. Yes. We made mention earlier Basil Gogos, a world's most famous movie monster portrait artist.
Yeah, I have that.
Good. You're a man of taste and dignity, you are.
I have it too.
Kerry Gamble. You familiar with Kerry Gamble?
Yes.
All right. Kerry Gamble and I wrote this book and put it together. And we have an introduction by Rob Zombie. A lot of movie directors, actors, and rock stars are big Basil Gogos fans.
Yeah, Rob is a big fan. He's from up the street from me. Rob was a big fan of all that stuff.
I love this. Look at this Barnabas Collins. This is a masterpiece.
Oh,
yeah, it is.
Look at his eyes. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's next level stuff. Next level.
And that is look at his cane. You remember in Dark Shadows, there was a portrait of Barnabas that hung in the house. This painting is so much better than that one that actually hung on the show. That's a funny story.
Oh,
this is Frankenstein, but that's not Karloff. Who knows who that is? Which actor was that?
Is that the one from Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein?
Yes.
Yeah! You can't get me, Spurlock!
Roy's favorite movie.
This is the second most famous actor to play the monster is Glenn Strange. Okay?
Oh, the chat said it. The chat said it right there.
Years later, Glenn Strange played the bartender on Gunsmoke.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All right. So I got a phone call, and this guy says, I understand you have a Basil Gogos book. I said, that's right. He says, is there any Glenn Strange in that book? I'm saying, well, let me think. Yes. We have one painting of Glenn as the monster in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. He says, in that case, I'll buy the book. I said, so you're a big Glenn Strange fan, huh? He says, I was his makeup man in Hollywood for 35 years.
Oh,
Wow.
So that's kind of phone calls you get every now and then. I sold a, my mind goes blank. What was the director of JFK? Oliver Stone.
Oliver, yeah.
In San Diego, you never know who you go to see in San Diego. I sold a Basil Gogos book to Oliver Stone in San Diego. And he says, I'm going to buy this for my son. I think he'll like it. I want him to learn about some of this art. He says, I'm actually buying it for the men's magazine illustrations as much or more than the monsters. That was Basil's second biggest audience was, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember, but when I was a kid, the magazine racks, the pulps died. Basically, when comics came in, it was the beginning of the end for the pulps.
Yeah.
But they kind of adapted into two different formats. One was a digest, like size of Reader's Digest or a TV guide. So there were like science fiction digests like Galaxy. Wally Wood did lots of illustrations. Ray Morrow, Dan Adkins, different people did a lot of illustrations for Galaxy magazine. That was a big distribution magazine. And that ran for years. There were others, Amazing, which had originally been a pulp, turned into a digest.
Right,
so
right.
A lot of the science fiction pulps continued as digest magazines. But this other thing came out, which they called men's adventure magazines. And you'll see like covers, guys in the woods with their shirts ripped off in a swamp battling some kind of overgrown wild animal.
Yeah, like a night at Steve's house. That's like just think of Steve.
That's what I was thinking. Last Friday, and a giant beaver, an attack of the giant beaver or something. The menacing giant teeth in the front of the monstrous beaver. But they also, the other kind of men's adventure magazines were like a lot of Nazi stuff, like torture. The Nazis had captured, some gorgeous woman, and they had going to brand her or something like that. Or a female Nazi was going to torture some American GI that they had tied up or something. So that was the two themes for the covers. But Basil, there were a lot of good quality illustrators that did work for those magazines. Good to hear you.
Yeah, we had
There's another one, Spurlock.
Pesca says Basil was a wonderful gentleman. At Heroes, we had a cool conversation regarding storytelling. Thanks for sharing that.
This is a book I did on Jeffrey Jones. Jeff and I were good friends, and we had plans to do. We did one book. We did a Jeff Jones sketchbook. George Pratt helped me on that. George Pratt and I went up to Woodstock. Jeff lived in the Woodstock area. I think Bearsville, technically, but it's the same area. And we spent the weekend up there going through artwork and interviewing him, not for this book, but for the Jones sketchbook. And that was a great memory. But then we did this one, and I kind of wanted to create a bit. This was 4 different Jones experts that all knew Jones working together, Hill, Colleen, Maris, and myself. But I kind of wanted to orchestrate, to the best of my abilities, kind of a studio reunion. Jeff Jones, Bernie Wrights, and Mike Kaluta and Barry Windsor Smith worked together famously. And, guys my age, to us, they were the Beatles of fantasy art and comics art in the 70s. They were, kind of, revolutionary. And so we were able to get Bernie to write an essay and Kaluta, and we found a rare essay that Jones wrote about art that's only in this deluxe slipcase edition. So we weren't able to get anything out of Barry. I think we got a quote out of Barry, but we weren't able to get an essay. So that was my best attempt at a studio reunion. I did a Roy Krinkle book where I wanted to do a Flegels. You familiar with the Flegels? So like Williamson in the 50s, Al Williamson, Frazetta, Roy Krinkle, Angelo Torres. That was the key group. They had other buddies that would come in and out, like George Woodbridge or Gray Morrow, would hang out with him sometimes. They all loved Wally Wood, but Wood was the most popular artist of the group in the 50s. Wood was more successful at that point than the others had become yet. So he was too busy. He was too busy working most of the time and also he was already married. Those guys were still young and going out and chasing skirts and going to movies and playing baseball. And Wood was a little bit too busy with work, and he was already married, so he didn't have time to do all that stuff. But they'd go over to his studio, so Al called him an honorary Flegel. They called themselves the Flegels. There's two stories about where the name came from, but there was, I think, some bank robbers in real life called the Flegel Gang. And one day these guys, Al was the central figure of the Flegels, and they came in together into the EC office, and I think it was Kurtzman that said, "Oh, look out, it's the Flegel Gang." And it stuck, and they called them the Flegels after that. So I wanted to do, when I did this Roy Krinkle book, kind of a Flegel reunion. So I got, Al wrote a chapter for us, and practically every chapter was like a guest essay. We had, Kaluta contributed, Al contributed, and Frazetta almost never wrote anything. He almost never did an interview about a different artist. He rarely did interviews even about himself, let alone about some other artist. But I was able to get a contribution from Frank, and also got one from Torres. So we actually had a Flegel reunion in that Roy Krinkle book. And that was also nominated for Book of the Year at the Eisner Awards. I've had about 6 Eisner Book of the Year nominations, not a single win. I was calling myself the Susan Lucci of the Eisner Awards, except she finally won an award. So that line doesn't work anymore. But I remember a quote from Paul Levitz, the president emeritus of DC Comics, saying that he says, "Well, you can tell David's heart is in everything he does, because nobody thinks they're going to get rich doing a book on Roy Krinkle, so he has to be doing it." I love it. And also, if you remember the CBG Comics Buyer's Guide, long running tabloid, when they used to review my publications, practically every time I got a review out of CBG, it said, "This is obviously a labor of love." And the obvious was because they could tell I was putting more work into it than it would make as far as a profit. Because to me, if I'm honoring an artist that has a 50, 60-year career, I want that book to be of quality, that they deserve. And another thing is, like, a lot of times when someone important passes away, everyone wants to pay tributes and say wonderful things. I'm like, let's honor these guys while they're still here. Well, unfortunately, at this point, I've lost a lot of them. Roy and Steranko are like the biggest. They're the old timers now. And when I was a kid, Roy and Neal and Steranko were the new guys, and Denny O'Neil. That was the new wave. Yeah. And then a couple of years later, you got like Barry Smith, Bernie Wrightson, and Jeff Jones and Kaluta company. But that was a big new wave. Roy and Adams and Steranko and Denny O'Neil. Yeah. The fresh blood. Oh, this is that's my latest Frazetta book. This is what I call definitive reference, and it catalogs and I comment on with a lot of direct quotes from Frank. Every book. This is only on his book covers, but it's every one in chronological order, so you can see if the art style changed, what he was doing first, when he did it. You can even count, say, "Oh, this is Frazetta's 4th book paperback cover ever," or "This is Frazetta's 14th book cover ever."
Well, that's a gorgeous looking book.
Oh,
It's got all the data, even the editor's name, which has never been listed anywhere else before. I did a lot of extra research trying to tie down some of that information.
the quality is incredible, Dave. You do such a good job with all the, like, you put everything in it. I mean, you can tell that it's a passion for you. I mean, it's wonderful stuff, man. Got to appreciate that kind of hard work.
Thank you.
I love those images. Oh my God. I can't tell you how many of those Conans I ripped off at the bookstore when I was a kid.
Now, you know, one thing about Frazetta is he would get the paintings back after publication, and frequently he would paint more on them. So the only way to see the original version is in these original publications.
Oh,
so
wow.
I never knew that.
Yeah, this book shows them in their original format. Like this one, this Tarzan over here, he turned that into a woman. That became.
Oh my God.
Yeah. There's a couple stories as to why, but this changed into a woman.
Look at how incredible that perspective is incredible.
Would he repaint them to use for other covers?
Not most of the time. He'd only do it for his own taste, and
Okay.
sometimes it was a matter of him saying, "Well, the way I painted it originally, it's obviously an illustration for a story. I want it to be more of a fine art piece now that it's been published." And so he could change it. Like there's one called Strange Creatures of Space and Time. Has a guy with, looks like a safari guy, great white hunter or whatever, facing all these aliens from different dimensions or different planets. And so when he got it back, he painted the guy out and he put a naked woman down. Well, that makes it a fine art piece.
Yeah.
By Frank's definition, and I'm not arguing with it.
Wow.
So, but it was obviously an illustration before. So a lot of the changes he did like that. One of the famous ones, this original Egyptian queen, occasionally known as Egyptian princess, that was originally a cover for a Warren horror comic magazine. I believe that one ran on Eerie originally. Well, that was. A lot of people, when they see the painting today, they don't understand the storytelling behind it. This wild cat has just broken its chain, and they don't know who it's going to have for lunch.
Mm.
So that's the horror. Well, he originally painted it, and you could see horror on the princess's, the queen's face. But after he got the painting back, he just wanted a masterpiece painting. He didn't want an illustration that was about horror. So he changed her face just to make her the most beautiful person, she could be. But that painting also influenced George Lucas' design of the slave Leia costume.
Yeah.
In the book, and again, this is the finest quality reproduction, and the largest trim size.
Right there, David.
This is the original version here, and you can kind of see the horror in her face.
Yeah.
And then the update, she's just looking gorgeous.
Oh.
Okay. And then on the next page, I go into the Lucas Star Wars connections, and there's the design, the Frazetta design, and then there's the Leia, and then I've got a quote from Frazetta and a quote from Lucas's costume designer, confirming that Frazetta was a big influence on that design.
Wow.
So there's a lot of information in this book that has not been covered in any Frazetta book before. And it's a nice book, and won awards. There's been translated into a couple of foreign languages.
Mm-hmm.
So that one, and also that benefits and helps keep the museum open, the original museum that Frank and Ellie built on their property right next to their home in Pennsylvania. If it's East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, if you're in New York City, if traffic was low, don't hold your breath waiting for low traffic. But if you're in New York City and there was low traffic, you'd go out the Lincoln Tunnel toward PA, taking I-80, and it's the first exit when out of Jersey crossing into PA, which would be with no traffic about an hour from New York City. Realistically, with traffic, it could be an hour and a half easy. If you're in Philly, it's a little longer drive up from Philly. It's about an hour and a half if the traffic's not bad coming up from Philly. So anytime if someone's not in the area regularly, but if you're traveling to New York or you're traveling to Philly, you got a day, you might want to take a little side trip and go over there to the...
Oh, yeah. And do they still have the majority of their paintings there, the majority of the stuff, or?
There were 4 kids, 2 sons in Pennsylvania and 2 daughters that moved to Florida, and they split up the paintings 4 ways. But three of the kids have been selling their paintings. That Egyptian queen sold for $5.4 million a couple of years ago, and this one, Dark Kingdom, just sold for $6 million only about a month ago.
That's the Molly Hatchet cover, correct?
Yeah, and that Molly Hatchet cover, Frank got a gold record award for that cover, and it sold 2 million copies in initial release. So that's possibly the broadest distribution he had on a single item.
Yeah.
The book covers, say for instance, the Conan paper books sold very well for paperbacks, which would have been like, 100,000 per printing. They print 100,000. It sells out over 9 months to a year. They print another 100,000. Eventually there's a quote from my buddy Doc Dave Winowitz, who was one of, for a while there, I'd say he probably was Frank's closest friend. And in the Frazetta documentary, I believe it's in the Frazetta documentary, he's saying like, suddenly paperbacks are selling millions of copies. Yes, they did sell millions of copies. If millions of copies is 2 million copies, and you add up the reprints of the whole series, it is millions of copies. But that one cover on the Molly Hatchet cover sold millions of copies all by that, just on its own. They did Death Dealer on a different Molly Hatchet, and that one sold 1 million. But that one, Flirting with Disaster, sold 2 million.
Yeah, my God.
Wow.
First off, every time I see those Frazettas and all that stuff, I think of Steven is all naked in front of his mirror at the videos he sends. I love him to death, and I think
the videos. I thought you were hanging out at his place and y'all were doing the video.
He's got John Buscema and Frazettas all over the place, and okay, David, I have a question for you about Wally Wood. Did he have any daughters or anybody that inherited his stuff or any family? I never knew about.
I am the head of the Wood estate. All right. Anybody wants to do Wally Wood business, talk to me. We would love to make some cartoons. We'd love to make some movies. We're doing. Vanguard publishes a lot of material, like I showed you the Wood War collection, but other things sometimes we'll license it out through Fantagraphics. We do a lot of work with Fantagraphics, including this is the ultimate Canon collection ever. And what makes this better, there was one earlier in the 90s called the Complete Canon. This one's more complete. Well, how can it be more complete than the Complete Canon? Is because the Complete Canon was the complete newspaper strip, but there were a couple of episodes of Canon in comic book format. And so this one includes all the newspaper strips and the comic book format version. So this is completer than the one that came out in the 90s called the Complete Canon. And this is top quality. We found better material to shoot from than the one that was done in the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy.
We're also doing, but back to the family business. Wood was married 3 times. He never sired any offspring. His second wife had kids from her prior marriage. So briefly, he had some stepkids with his second. I got an email one time from a guy says, "I was Wally Wood's son," and I'm like, and finally it dawned on me, because that's all he said initially. We started doing emails back and forth. It was the stepson he had for a little while. He lived on yeah, circa 70, 71. He lived Long Island with his second wife. But his third wife also had some kids. One son, but the son was already grown. I think he was a cop in Chicago, but 2 daughters. And so Wood spent more time with those 2 daughters. But as far as heirs go, he left in the will, he left some things to his first wife, and then he had a house in Connecticut. He left, but his health started failing really bad. He hadn't been with his third wife for long, and he felt guilty, the idea that she'd have to take care of him, that he was looking at becoming an invalid because he had kidney failure and a stroke. And so he signed the deed to the house, which he bought before they got together. It was his house. He gifted her the house, and they separated, but nobody ever filed any divorce papers. So they were actually still married, even though and the only reason they separated was because he felt guilty of the idea of this wonderful woman that he loved having to take care of him, and him being embarrassed that he couldn't take care of himself. But there was a friend of his, a dude up in upstate New York. He didn't have any problem with him taking care of him. So he moved from Connecticut to upstate New York and up by Syracuse. And that guy kept him alive for about a year and a half and did everything he could for him. And he wrote into the will, making him the executor and of his estate. So there was also an insurance policy. The first wife and the third wife split the insurance policy. The first wife got what was in the bank account, and the third wife got the house. And what was known as the residual estate, which was basically all copyrights, went to the head of the estate. That was a guy named Jack Robinson. And then he called in another close Wood associate, Bill Pearson, who had been a writer for the early creepy magazines at Warren. He'd been an editor at Charlton, and he took over as the head of Wits End magazine, which Wood founded. So Pearson was one of Wood's closest longtime guys. So Robinson called Pearson to help him. He was so distraught, actually, when Wood died. He was so broken up. He had a hard time dealing with it, and he asked Pearson to help him. So Pearson kind of managed the estate, kind of for Robinson for 30 years. And I had done some projects with him, including the Wally Wood sketchbook. And at some point, Pearson said to me, "I've been doing this for 30 years, and every project you work on is much more successful than the ones I do without you." I was kind of assisting him gradually more and more over a few later years. He says, "Would you be interested in taking over?" And I said, "Well, that's up to you and Jack, but I will, if you want me to do it, I'd be honored." So Bill and Jack, and then we also were in touch with by that point, his third wife had passed away. I was in touch with her before she passed away. And then her estate was run by her daughter. And she says, yes, everyone's stamp of approval. His third wife's stamp of approval, and Robinson's stamp of approval, and Bill Pearson's stamp of approval. So I took over management of the estate in 2012. Wow.
Okay, we're going to... Dave, you're a wealth of information, and we're going to definitely have you back. We're going to first...
saying long-winded?
No, but
I got a
see, this,
question
this
here.
is what we love, though. Just so you know, we want to educate people. We don't care what's going out in the world. We want this. We love that, and you're a wealth of information. So, Steve, you want to give some last words to Mr. Spurlock?
Yeah, I would. I think anyone who has watched this show has been incredibly educated, and the name dropping is just astounding.
Awesome.
And it's, again, this is the reason for this show, to have people who have first-hand accounts, people who can correct the record, people who are doing great work, and we like to get that out there. So it's great that people can see your books, go out and buy them, and then get to know the artists, creators more. And that is because of your hard work and your incredible knowledge of being in the right place at the right time, and also by putting yourself in the right place at the right time. And I'm sure all of us really appreciate it, and I really appreciate it too.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now?
Yeah, now I'm going to end on two notes. One note is, first, I want everyone to head on over to VanguardPublishing.com. You can check out all these books. There's great descriptions, great details. You can scroll through the books, Frank Frazetta tab, Wally Wood tab about Vanguard. I mean, you scroll through, you're going to see just the quality that, Mr. Spurlock has put into these books. And you can purchase them here, what's in stock, what's not in stock. So definitely check it out. The link is in the description below. The link is also pinned to the top of the live chat. So I really want to encourage everyone to check this website out. And then I want to give my I want to thank you for coming on. We're definitely going to have you on again because there's much more to talk about. But I want to give a bit of my time to my buddy Kevin, who had a question here in the live chat, and he wants to know, what was Wood's time in Derby like?
He had a house. Was the only. Well, let's see. They had a house in the 50s in Queens. He and his first wife, but he had a little house in Connecticut, and the first he was there, that's where he got married to his third wife at. And there's one photo I love that shows Wood on his front porch playing guitar with a bunch of long-haired people around him, which was I would say a bunch of hippies. And you know what? I had hair then too.
We all have hair at some point.
Yeah, that was. I love that photo. There is a photo that people think shows how he fell from grace and his terrible ending, and they misunderstand what that photo is.
I know which one you're talking about, Dave. Yeah.
Yes.
They think, he's lost everything. He's living on a little cot in a one room. And,
with the typewriter in front of him?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the photo. No, what happened there was that's when he had his house in Connecticut. Now, he was in two different towns in Connecticut, so I'd have to look up which one was Derby. But in Connecticut, he had this house. But when he got married to his third wife, he wanted for her to make the house as domestic as possible. A comics artist, single bachelor comics artist, will have work all over the house, okay? Mm-hmm. But in honor of his new wife, he wanted the house to look as domestic as possible. So there was like a separate storage building. And he was turning that into a little studio so that the living room didn't look like a studio, that it looked like a nice domestic situation.
Yes.
And he in that photo was taken while he was in the midst of the move. He hadn't even totally moved into there, but he did regularly keep a cot in the studio because he worked long hours and he might take a little nap and then he'd get up and go back to work. And he didn't want to go, if she was asleep, go and get in bed with her and wake her up. And then get up 2-3 hours later to go back to work again. So he did keep a cot in that little studio room. But that's what that is. That's not where he died. That's not. Yeah. And the place he did die at was a modern, decent apartment in a suburb of LA. At that time, today the place is a little run down, but it was a lot newer back when he was there in 1981.
See, Dave, that's the information we like to give, like, because some people will have questions about that, and you're a guy that knows all that stuff. And in ending this, Dave, once again, we're definitely going to have you back on. We can go individually when we have a Frazetta day, we have a wood day, I mean, and yeah, we'd love to have you back. And I mean, and first off, I'd like to thank you for all the work that you do for the creators, and a personal thank you for me, because back then in 2016 in Rhode Island, you didn't have to invite me and my friend to that gathering of those gathering of the greats, and you let us come, and that it just
Tom Palmer, he didn't hang out for the party, but he was around that year, and that was always great spending a little time with Tom Palmer.
Yeah,
I was very happy that you could be there, and you know what? We've lost so many people. Any of us could go at any time, and anyone that I've touched, nothing could mean more to me. And if I was ever rude to anyone, it's just because I was working my butt off trying to take care of somebody else, and I never would mean to be rude to anyone, because we're all into this because we love it, and it's meant so much to us that it's brought us through all these years.
Yeah, and I thank you for that. And what a great way to end. And Mr. Spurlock, we appreciate you and how you keep the work going. And we got the links down below, all that. And so we're going to definitely have you back, Dave, and we're going to have a good time. So Steve, get us out of here, because Mighty Mystic Milner is starting to blow.
Boom.
Boom it is.
Hey,
Thank
everyone.
You,
Thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP, and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you soon.